Let's start our look at the Renaissance, the early Renaissance, by taking a quick look at this classic image from what's called the Vitruvian Man. And what I want to emphasize here is that the focus is on a human. It is focusing on a body. It's focusing on motion. And it's focusing on the idea that man could be the ultimate source of information or knowledge, or could just be the focal point of what is happening on the earth. Now, these are all interpretations we could have. But what we want to think about here within the traditions of the classical world, as many of them are reconstructed and remembered again in the early Reformation, is that in essence, this is going to be a movement that has artistic and educational elements to it that focus on the idea of what people can do, what the human mind or the human hand can accomplish. And in many ways, it sets itself a bit apart from some of the earlier thinking of the Middle Ages, where there was this sense that people were enduring, they were going through what they needed to do, that they were not in charge of their own destiny. I mean, these are just perceptions, mind you, but the idea that somehow the Renaissance man is the man, the woman who's going to be able to take charge of their own life, reason their way through issues in everything from technology to economic changes. That this is an era where the human is coming into being an action figure. Not like an action figure you're going to buy at the store, but an action figure in the sense that you are moving, you're taking charge of your life, you're taking charge of your own education, and you're applying your logic. There will be then this idea that man is the measure of all things. That the way in which we understand the world is not simply by reflecting on Scripture in whatever holy tradition someone comes out of, but applying your skills to understanding and reasoning your way through the world. The idea here also is that within the Renaissance time period, we're going to be emphasizing the idea of the individual, that each person, each mind has a distinct measure, that it has an ability and can apply itself, and that it has power, and it has ability to change, and it has ability to, over time, create a better world, that by the application of human energy, effort, and intelligence, the world could be improved. That will be an element we'll deal with. Another one will be that people are going to look towards the idea of what's going to be called secularism. That is the idea of a non-religiously controlled thought, or non-religious thought when appealing or looking at an issue or a problem. It does not necessarily mean a direct challenge to religious thinking, but it will provide an alternative explanation for many things over time, and we'll see this later on, for example, in areas of science and other important areas like that. Another thing to focus on here is that the ideas within the early Renaissance are going to be twofold. One, there is this idea of Renaissance, or rebirth. It's a French term, rebirth. And what they mean by that is that this is the rebirth of an appreciation and an understanding, especially of ancient Greco-Roman knowledge. That many people by the time period of the 14th and the 15th centuries in Europe, especially amongst the educated classes, those who have especially increasingly got involved in universities that have been developing in the last couple of hundred years of European history, they are looking for that knowledge, that philosophical, religious, and scientific knowledge that they can use to apply to their world. That the ancients, the Greeks and the Romans, their philosophies had in many ways provided interesting and fascinating models, and many people want to get back to the original texts of those languages and find a way to understand their world, in part by using the early Greek and Roman thinkers, philosophers, and writers as a way to get at that. That means that you have to have accurate knowledge of Greek and classic Latin, and that's going to be encouraging people to go back and study those languages again. It also will be that, remember when the Crusaders at different times had gone off to the eastern part of the Mediterranean, they had sacked or taken lots of things from libraries, and by the 13th century, many Europeans are coming into contact with more scripts and more things written from various cultures that had been stored in some Byzantine libraries, and it opened up people in the West to more opportunities, more ideas of understanding of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, Epicurus and Zeno, all the classic philosophers that we have covered earlier. It also means that as people are learning and thinking about the classic Latin or Greek texts that they are reading and trying to understand, they are increasingly seeing that there are some oddities of translation, some mistranslation, some problems with repetition and other things. In other words, they're applying their mind and seeing that over time some of the scribes who used to hand write out these had made some errors, maybe skipped a sentence or forgotten a word or two. And the idea was not to sort of pounce on them and say, aha, look, you screwed up. No, the idea is let's go back and fix this. Let's make sure that the whole context of all the different versions of this are put together and we have the best translation and we take all the wrinkles out of what's happening, right? That close scholarship of text will be in two ways. Some will be of classic pagan works, non-Christian works from the Greeks and the Romans, but there's also going to be a review of some of the religious texts in many of the early languages of the 1st and 2nd and 3rd centuries. The Greek that was used at that time, Syriac, Aramaic, and other languages that the scholars not only of the ancient world but also of the origins of Christianity are going to be looking at those texts and trying to find if it's true, if it's proper, the translations and everything else like that. What's also going to happen is that this kind of idea and controlling understandings of Greek and Latin texts will also be increasingly valuable to lawyers and to other people involved in government, that there's an idea that this ancient language it's nice to study, that's great, but for the vast majority of people, what application does it have? And this will be the time period in European history where they're looking at and understanding the ancient aspects of their history and how valuable they can be in structuring their modern world. Many people are going to start to go into the idea that education has value. Many men will be going into some of the church universities that had been founded in especially the 12th century and into the 13th, and going there not to become organized members of the religious community, not to go and take full priestly vows or to serve in some cloistered monastery someplace, but instead to get the right kind of education and use that education to move forward in both their service to the state as a scribe or a secretary for someone, say like a king, but also the idea that you can use that to become a better lawyer or a better, more educated nobleman. All right? So this early Renaissance period is focused on the idea of how it's going to try to reclaim ancient knowledge, re-understand and re-educate themselves in the needs of Greek and Latin, but then also how to apply some of those ancient models in terms of the development of law and other things that are of more secular necessity as they move forward. Take a look at that early tension between rediscovering ancient pagan, non-Christian classics, but also how the early Renaissance thinkers are going to apply their skills to many of the scriptural materials from within Christianity as well. Take a look at the reading that you have available to you and see also if there's some of the sample questions that will cover this early era